Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below. I was attacked last night. Not in some dramatic action movie kind of way. It wasn't about blood or bruises. It was about what it meant, about what it showed me, about what happens when love, fame, and expectation collide in the same fragile heartbeat. And since it happened, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. It started right after the news broke, the announcement I'd been terrified to make public for months. I was getting married. The words looked so simple in the statement, yet behind them was the most complicated truth of my life. I thought I was prepared for the reaction. I thought I understood what it meant to live under the world's spotlight. I was wrong. The moment those words hit the internet, it was like a switch flipped in people's minds. Some celebrated, some cried, some got angry, and a few decided that my happiness was their betrayal. Last night, I learned what that really meant. I was leaving a small restaurant in Seoul. It was late around 11. The air was cold, heavy with that kind of autumn silence that almost feels like judgment. I had spent dinner with a few close friends, Taehyung, Namjoon, and Jimin. We were trying to be normal, just laughing, teasing each other about who would cry first at the wedding. Jimin bet that it would be me. Taehyung said it would be him. Namjoon just smiled quietly, that thoughtful smile that hides entire philosophies. It was supposed to be an ordinary night, a quiet pocket of peace before the storm that was already building online. When we stepped out, the streetlights painted everything in pale gold. I pulled my hoodie up, not to hide, but to feel smaller for a moment. Fame makes you big in ways you can't escape, even when you wish you could disappear. We were heading toward our cars when someone called out loud, sharp, filled with something I couldn't quite name. Jungkook! I turned. He was running toward me, phone raised, eyes wide, not with admiration, but accusation. His voice cracked through the air like a slap. Is it true? He shouted. Are you really getting married? I didn't answer immediately. I learned the hard way that silence can sometimes protect you more than words. But silence to the wrong kind of person can also provoke them. He came closer, and the questions poured out like bullets. To who? Why now? What about Army? You said we were your family. I could feel Jimin shift beside me. His hand brushed my shoulder lightly. A silent signal. Keep calm. Taehyung's posture changed, ready if things got worse. Namjoon's eyes scanned the crowd that started forming a dozen phones rising like a forest of judgment. I took a breath. Hey, I said gently, I appreciate your support, truly, but this is my personal life. I hope you can understand. That word personal seemed to set something off. His face twisted, the kind of anger that comes from disappointment turned inside out. So now we don't matter, he spat. All those years, all that support, and you hide this from us? I tried to step back to de-escalate, but he followed, his voice louder now. You think you're better than us just because you're marrying someone who isn't one of us. And then it happened. A shove. Quick, unexpected. I stumbled back into the side of a parked car. It wasn't hard enough to injure me, but it was enough to make the world freeze for a second. Enough to make me realize how fragile the line is between love and hate when people believe they own a piece of you. Security rushed in, but I waved them off. The man was already backing away, shaking, shouting something about betrayal, about how idols shouldn't lie. I watched him disappear into the crowd, swallowed by the glow of the city. I stood there, heart pounding, adrenaline burning through the chill. Not because I was afraid, but because I suddenly understood something I'd never truly faced before. Fame creates invisible debts. Every smile you give becomes a currency. Every word you share becomes a promise. Every silence becomes an insult. And when you finally choose something for yourself, something real, something sacred, some people treat it like theft. When I got home, I sat on the floor in the dark. My phone buzzed endlessly, texts from management, messages from friends, even calls from my parents asking if I was okay. But what I couldn't shake was the echo of that man's words. You said we were your family. I kept thinking about what that meant. Because in some ways, he wasn't wrong. BTS has always been built on connection. ARMY isn't just an audience, it's an entire universe of love, energy, and shared dreams. I owe everything I have to them. But somewhere along the way, maybe the line blurred between gratitude and ownership, between affection and entitlement. Jimin called me around 2 a.m. He didn't say much, just asked if I was okay. His voice was calm, but I could hear the worry behind it. You can't carry all of this alone, Kook, he said. People's reactions don't define your worth. He paused for a second, then added softly, you deserve love, too. That hit me harder than the shove ever could. Because deep down, I had been struggling with that exact fear that choosing to love openly meant betraying the love I already had from millions. Taehyung texted later, just one line. The louder the world gets, the more you have to protect your peace. That's Sohim philosophy disguised as simplicity. Namjoon sent me a long message about boundaries. He said, people confuse access with intimacy. Just because they see you doesn't mean they know you. And the moment you say no, they call it arrogance. Those words echoed in my mind until sunrise. Because that's exactly what last night was about. Not violence, not even anger, but the clash between expectation and humanity. I've spent most of my life saying yes. Yes to schedules, yes to cameras, yes to the version of me people want. I thought saying yes made me kind. But now I wonder, maybe kindness isn't about saying yes. Maybe it's about knowing when to say no. I thought about my parents too. My mom, who used to tell me as a kid, Jungkook, don't ever forget to rest. And my dad, who said, son, your voice matters most when you're honest, not when you're perfect. I wonder what they'd think if they saw me last night standing there in the street, apologizing to someone who was angry that I dared to love. That's the strangest part. Even after he shoved me, even after the shouting and chaos, I felt guilty. I kept thinking maybe I should have smiled, maybe I should have taken the photo, maybe I should have been softer, nicer. It's a habit so deep it feels genetic, the guilt of disappointing people, even when they're the ones crossing your line. Where did I learn that? Who taught me that protecting my peace means hurting someone else's feelings? Maybe it's the industry, maybe it's culture. Maybe it's the endless training that teaches you to serve the crowd before yourself, to smile when you're tired, to thank even those who wound you. But as I sat there, looking at my reflection in the window, I realized something. If love comes with the condition that I must destroy myself to keep it, then that isn't love, it's control. The bruise near my shoulder will fade. The memory will blur. But the lesson won't. Boundaries are not rejection. Their respect both for yourself and for others. When I said no last night, I wasn't rejecting that man. I was respecting my own limit. And maybe that's something all of us forget sometimes. We confuse love with obedience, passion with possession. We think if someone truly cares, they'll never say no. But the truth is, love needs space to breathe. Without boundaries, even the deepest love suffocates. I don't share this story for sympathy. I share it because I think every person, idol, fan, friend, family, needs to remember that humanity comes before expectation. That behind every smile you see on screen is someone who gets tired, who makes mistakes, who just wants to be understood without being claimed. When I close my eyes, I can still see that moment, the confusion in his eyes turning into anger. And I wonder, how many of us have done that to someone we love? How many times have we demanded something from someone just because we felt we deserved it? How many times have we turned affection into pressure, connection into entitlement? I'm not perfect. I've probably done it too, expected too much from people, mistaken access for care. But last night reminded me that empathy is not about possession, it's about perspective. When I announced my marriage, I knew some hearts would break. I didn't expect mine to ache with them, because every message that said, "I'm happy for you," felt like a blessing. And everyone that said, "You betrayed us," felt like a wound. But even wounds can teach you something. They remind you that you're still alive, still capable of feeling deeply. And that means there's still room to grow. I think about all 7 of us, me, Namjoon, Jin, Yoongi, Hoseok, Jimin, Taehyung, and how each of us has faced moments where the world felt too loud, too demanding. Jin once told me, "The price of being loved by millions is learning how to protect the small version of yourself that no one else sees." That line never made sense to me until now, because last night, standing under that streetlight, I felt that small version of myself, the one who just wanted to sing, to live, to love, shrinking beneath the noise. But I also realized something else. That version deserves protection. That version deserves boundaries. That version deserves happiness. Even if some people can't accept it, when I told my fiance what happened, she didn't say much. She just held my hand and whispered, "Don't let the loud ones define the quiet truth." It's strange how the simplest words can heal the heaviest thoughts. So here I am, sharing this with you, not as an idol, not as someone perfect, but as a person, learning again and again that love without boundaries isn't love, it's surrender. I know this story will be twisted, analyzed, turned into headlines. That's the cost of honesty. But I also know that somewhere, someone listening to this right now needs to hear it. Not because you're famous, but because you felt the same guilt for saying no, the same pressure to please everyone, the same fear of disappointing those who love you. You are not wrong for protecting yourself. You are not cruel for setting limits. You are not selfish for choosing peace. And if someone ever tells you otherwise, remember this. People who truly love you will never make you earn the right to rest. Last night I was attacked not just by a man, but by the expectations I had carried for too long. And as strange as it sounds, maybe I needed it. Maybe I needed that moment to finally understand that love isn't about giving everything away. It's about knowing what parts of yourself you must keep safe. The world will always want more songs, more smiles, more pieces of you. But you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't love anyone fully if you've forgotten how to love yourself first. So tonight, before I sleep, I'll remind myself of something I wish someone had told me sooner. Saying no is not rejection, it's respect. Boundaries don't separate love, they protect it. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real lesson hidden behind last night's brew. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight cut through the blinds like it was trying to expose everything I tried to bury in sleep. My phone was still buzzing. Mentions, messages, articles, reaction videos, all of it. Every headline had a version of my story, and none of them felt like mine. Jungkook assaulted after marriage reveal. Fan confrontation turns violent. BTS star sparks outrage with personal life. They made it sound like a scandal, not a human moment. And maybe that's what fame does. It turns your pain into public entertainment. The bruise under my shoulder throbbed faintly, but it wasn't the ache that kept me in bed. It was the heaviness in my chest, the kind that doesn't come from exhaustion, but from disappointment. I kept thinking about the people who were defending me online, the ones who said, "He deserves happiness." And I thought about the others who said, "He lied to us." Both sides used the same word "us" as if I belong equally to both. That's the strange part about being loved by millions. You exist everywhere and nowhere at the same time. People call it fame, but sometimes it feels more like fragmentation. Everyone owns a different version of you. One loves you for your voice, another for your vulnerability, another for what they think you represent. And then there's the real you, the one who just wants to breathe without an audience. Yoongi called around noon. His voice was calm as always, that kind of calm that hides entire oceans. "I saw the clip," he said. "You handled it better than most people would." I told him I didn't feel like I handled anything. I just froze. He sighed softly, then said, "You didn't freeze. You chose peace. That's harder than fighting back. That's Yoongi, always finding the poetry and restraint. Then he added, you know, when I released my solo album, people said I'd changed. Maybe I did. But the truth is, growth always looks like betrayal to those who want you to stay the same. His words lingered long after we hung up. Growth looks like betrayal. That sentence hit me like truth wrapped in sorrow. Maybe that's what this whole storm was really about. Not marriage, not love, but growth. The kind that makes people uncomfortable because it reminds them that nothing stays the same. I thought about our journey as BTS7 kids, running through practice rooms, chasing perfection, fighting exhaustion, laughing through pain. Back then, we didn't think about boundaries or privacy. We thought about survival, about reaching the next stage, about making people proud. And maybe in doing that, we unknowingly taught the world that we'd always belong to it. When I met Hoseok later that afternoon, he hugged me before saying anything. His hugs are different. They're grounding, like an anchor reminding you you're still human. We sat on a park bench, caps pulled low, just watching people pass. You know what's funny, he said? People think idols are always surrounded by love, but sometimes love is what hurts the most. I looked at him, confused, and he smiled faintly. Because the more people love you, the less they see you. They see what they need from you, not who you really are. I nodded, not because I fully understood, but because I felt it deep in my bones. I told him about the guilt, about how I kept replaying the moment and wishing I'd reacted differently. He listened quietly, then said, "Do you know what guilt really is? It's love, twisted into self-punishment. You feel guilty because you care, but caring doesn't mean you owe everyone everything." That line stayed with me all evening, because I realized that I've spent years confusing care with sacrifice. Every time someone said, "You're so kind, Jungkook," what they really meant was, you give too much of yourself away. That night, I watched some of the old videos of us from the early days. The messy hair, the nervous smiles, the chaotic laughter. We looked so alive, untouched by pressure, untouched by expectation. I paused at one moment. Jimin and I were goofing around behind the stage before a concert. Him making silly faces, me laughing uncontrollably. It was pure, unscripted joy. I realized how rare that had become, not because we stopped being close, but because somewhere along the way, everything started to matter too much. Every action became analysis. Every smile became a clue. Every silence became suspicion. I called Jimin again. He picked up instantly, like he'd been waiting. "Are you okay now?" he asked. I didn't know how to answer. Thinking, I said, "About how easy it is to forget that I'm just human." He chuckled lightly. "You're not supposed to forget that, Kook. That's what makes you you." There was a long pause, then he added, "You know, I used to worry that people loved us for what we gave them, not who we were. But last night, I saw something else. The ones who truly love you, they didn't scream. They didn't attack. They defended you quietly. Maybe love has different volumes, and the real kind doesn't need to shout." His words softened something in me. Because maybe that's what I'd been missing all along, the quiet ones. The fans who don't demand, don't invade, don't claim ownership, the ones who simply stay, the ones who send a silent prayer instead of a public opinion, the ones who understand that support doesn't mean control. When Jin called, he didn't talk about the incident at all. He just asked if I'd eaten. Typical Jin. But then he said something that made me laugh and tear up at the same time. "You know what I realized after the military," he said. "The world moves fast, but peace moves slow. If you chase peace the way we chase schedules, you'll never catch it." I asked him how he managed to stay so calm after coming back to such chaos. He said, "Because I stopped needing everyone to understand me. The moment you stop chasing understanding, you start finding peace." I didn't respond. I just listened. Because in that moment, I realized how much I still wanted people to understand me, to see that marriage doesn't mean abandonment, that love doesn't erase loyalty, that happiness doesn't cancel gratitude. But maybe Jin was right. Maybe peace doesn't come from being understood. Maybe it comes from letting go of the need to explain. Later that night, I went live for a few minutes. Not to address the incident, not to justify anything, just to sing. I didn't announce it, didn't title it, just pressed record and started playing the guitar. The chat filled instantly. Thousands of comments, hearts, crying, emojis, messages from all around the world. And as I sang, I realized something simple but profound. Music is the only space where boundaries disappear without being violated. When I sing, I'm not explaining, I'm sharing. And sharing is not surrender, it's connection. After the live, I scrolled through the comments. Some were kind, others cruel, many confused, but one stood out. It said, "You don't owe us your life. We're just grateful you shared part of it." I read it over and over until my eyes blurred. That one comment felt like a hand on my shoulder, a reminder that empathy still exists, that not everyone wants to own your soul just because they admire your art. I thought again about that man in the street, the one who shouted and shoved. I don't hate him. I don't even resent him. I think in some strange way, he was hurting too. Maybe he wasn't angry at me personally. Maybe he was angry at change, at the reminder that his favorite chapter in my story was closing. People don't lash out because they're evil. They lash out because they're scared. Scared of being left behind. Scared of losing the version of you that comforted them. And maybe that's the tragedy of fame. It makes people believe they're part of your life, when in reality, they're part of your story. And those aren't the same thing. A life is lived. A story is shared. You can love the story deeply, but the life behind it still belongs to the person living it. When I went to the practice room the next day, it was empty. Just mirrors and silent. I stood there, looking at my reflection, bruised shoulder, tired eyes, messy hair, and for the first time, I didn't see Jungkook the idol. I saw Jeon Jungkook, the boy who once sang covers in his room, dreaming about reaching people through his voice. That boy didn't want fame. He wanted connection. Somewhere along the line, those two got mixed up. Namjoon joined me later. He walked in quietly, carrying 2 coffees. We sat on the floor. No cameras, no microphones, just 2 people who've been through too much together to need words. Finally, he said, "You know, when I first became leader, I thought my job was to protect everyone from pain. But the truth is, pain is part of growth. What matters is that we don't let it define us." He looked at me, his eyes tired but steady. "You're doing something brave, Kook. You're building a life that's yours. Most people don't even know what that means." I asked him if he thought I disappointed people. He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but disappointment is just love that hasn't adapted yet." That line broke me open inside, because it's true. When people love you deeply, change feels like betrayal. But if love is real, it eventually catches up. It learns, it forgives, it transforms. After he left, I stayed there in the quiet, thinking about how every bruise, physical or emotional, teaches you where you need stronger boundaries. And every attack, no matter how unfair, reminds you what you stand for. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just learning. Learning that it's okay to be misunderstood, that it's okay to choose peace over explanation, that it's okay to be human, even when the world prefers your perfection. Because in the end, maybe the greatest act of courage isn't standing on a stage. Maybe it's standing alone, saying softly but firmly, "I am allowed to protect my heart." And that's what I intend to do. I didn't leave the house for 2 days after that. Not because I was afraid to go out, but because I needed to face myself first. The mirror had become a battlefield. Every time I looked into it, I saw a version of me that felt unfamiliar. The one who smiled for cameras, the one who reassured fans everything was okay, the one who said he was fine even when he wasn't. But the reflection staring back this time wasn't that Jungkook. It was just me, tired, human, and still trying to understand why love and pain had started to sound like synonyms. The world had turned my wedding announcement into a spectacle. News channels dissected every word. Analysts speculated about who she was. Commentators debated if idols should marry at all. And through it all, I kept hearing the same question. Why now? As if there's ever a right time to choose love. That morning, I sat with my fiancée in silence. The sun was hitting her face in that calm, unbothered way light touches people who haven't grown used to being watched. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't offer comfort. She just handed me coffee and said, "You don't need to explain your heart to people who never tried to hear it." Her words felt like a doorway, simple, but leading somewhere deeper. We talked for hours about the chaos, about the fans, about what it means to love someone who belongs partly to the world. She told me she never wanted to take me away from music, from BTS, from ARMY. She said, "I'm not asking for less of you. I'm asking for more honesty from the part of you that doesn't perform." That line carved itself into my memory because for the first time, I realized how much I performed, not just on stage, but in life. That evening, I met Yoongi again. He came by unannounced, carrying a bag of food like an older brother who pretends he's just hungry but actually wants to check if you're still breathing. We ate quietly for a while, and then he said, "You know, Kook, people project what they wish they had. When you announced your marriage, some people saw the love they lost. Others saw the love they never had. That's why they react like that. They're not really mad at you. They're mourning their own dream." That hit me hard because I had never thought of it that way. The hate wasn't always hate. Sometimes it was heartbreak disguised as anger. And in a strange, painful way, that made me feel compassion instead of bitterness. Later, I drove to the studio where Hoseok was working. The lights were dim and music pulsed through the walls. He turned down the volume and smiled when he saw me. "You came," he said. I nodded. "Needed to breathe somewhere real." He laughed softly. "This room's been therapy for all of us." He played me a beat he'd been working on, something raw, unfinished, but alive. "It's about release," he said. "About letting go of people's versions of you." I closed my eyes and let the rhythm sink in. It felt like exhaling for the first time in weeks. Then Hoseok said something I'll never forget. "You know what freedom is? It's not running away from expectations. It's walking toward your truth even when people boo." When I left the studio, it was raining, the kind of rain that feels like forgiveness. I rolled down the window, let the air in, and for a moment, I didn't feel like Jungkook the idol or Jungkook the fiancé. I just felt like a person who'd finally stopped apologizing for existing. But peace doesn't last long when the world is watching. The next day, management called. They wanted to discuss damage control, image strategies, statements to calm the public. I understood it's part of the machine. But part of me wanted to ask, when did love become a scandal? When did choosing happiness require public permission? Namjoon joined that call too. His voice, calm but firm, cut through the noise. "He doesn't need to apologize for living his life," he said. There was silence on the other end. That's the thing about Namjoon. When he speaks, people listen. Not because he's loud, but because truth sounds different when it comes from someone who carries it carefully. After the call, he texted me privately. "The hardest part about being real in this industry is accepting that not everyone deserves your honesty." Those words became my anchor for the rest of the day. I went for a walk that evening. Hoodie up, mask on, blending into the crowd. I passed by a group of teenagers singing BTS songs under a bridge. Their voices were shaky, but pure. I stood there quietly, listening. They didn't notice me, and for once, that anonymity felt like a gift. One of them was singing my part from Still With You. Her voice cracked on the high note, and her friend laughed. "You sound more like Jungkook's tired version," she teased. And the girl replied, "Then maybe that's the real one." I smiled beneath the mask. Maybe she was right. Maybe the tired version is the real one. The one who isn't flawless. The one who's learning that imperfection doesn't erase sincerity. When I got home, Jin had left a voice note. He said, "You know what, Kook? When I get married one day, I want people to understand that it doesn't mean I'm leaving anyone behind. It means I'm growing with them. That's what love should be, growth, not replacement. I replayed that voice note over and over because that's what I wanted people to understand about me. That my marriage isn't an exit, it's an expansion. It's me learning how to love better, not less. That night, I wrote in my journal a habit I picked up from Yoongi. I wrote, maybe pain is the proof that you cared honestly. And below it, maybe love isn't about avoiding hurt, but surviving it without losing grace. I looked out the window, the city lights blurring like tears, and thought about all 7 of us again. About how much we'd given, how much we'd lost, how much we'd learned. I thought about the army banners, the purple waves, the stadiums trembling beneath our voices. And I thought about how, even after everything, I still loved them deeply, fiercely, endlessly. But love, I realize, has to evolve. It has to make room for new forms, new faces, new futures. Otherwise, it becomes nostalgia, pretending to be devotion. I picked up my phone and sent a group text to all 6 members. No matter where life takes us, no matter who we love, I'll always carry you guys with me. You're not my past, you're my foundation. They all replied almost at once. Jin sent a heart emoji. Jimin wrote, you better invite me to every anniversary. Hoseok replied, we'll choreograph your wedding dance ourselves. Yoongi sent a single line, proud of you. Namjoon wrote, keep your peace sacred. And Taehyung, in his usual cryptic way, sent, when the world attacks, let music defend you. I read those messages and felt something shift inside me, a quiet acceptance. Because that's what brotherhood is. It doesn't always protect you from pain, but it reminds you you're never walking through it alone. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. Maybe more noise, maybe more judgment, maybe silence. But tonight, as I sit here, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time, clarity. The kind that comes when you finally stop living for permission. I was attacked for announcing my marriage. Yes. But maybe that moment wasn't just about anger, it was about revelation. About realizing that love and peace don't need to be approved by the crowd. They just need to be protected by truth. And that's exactly what I intend to do from now on. When the headlines reached America, it felt like the echo of a storm that had already destroyed the house but kept rumbling over the ruins. Western media picked it up within hours. Snippets of videos, exaggerated phrases, mistranslated quotes, global idol faces, fan fury over secret marriage. BTS star confronted in Seoul streets. Even some of the outlets that used to celebrate me were suddenly feeding on the chaos. That's how fame works. Applause and outrage are only 2 sides of the same hunger. For a day, I didn't check my phone. I deleted every news alert. I let the world talk without me. The silence felt like oxygen. I stayed at my parents' home in Busan, the same one where I used to record songs in my room when nobody believed they'd ever be heard. My mom cooked, my dad sat beside me, and for the first time in months, I wasn't Jungkook. I was just their son, bruised but breathing. My mother placed a bowl of soup in front of me and said quietly, you used to sing louder when you were small. Lately you whisper. I looked up, not knowing what to say. Maybe because everyone's listening now, I murmured. She shook her head. No, my son. You stopped listening to yourself. That sentence stayed with me all afternoon. Parents have a way of slicing through the noise with one truth. My father joined later, carrying old photo albums. Do you remember this? He asked, pointing to a picture of me with a guitar bigger than my body. You were fearless then. You sang to strangers on the beach. Now you look afraid of being heard. I smiled faintly. It's not fear of being heard, Dad. It's fear of being misunderstood. He nodded slowly. Then sing anyway. The world misunderstands everyone doing something real. That night I went out to the same beach from the photo. The wind smelled like salt and memory. I sat on the sand with my hoodie up, guitar on my lap, and sang softly just a few lines from an old song we once performed as BTS. 'Cause I'm in the stars tonight. It felt different now. older, heavier, but still alive. I remember the first time we sang it together, lights exploding, fans screaming, purple ocean everywhere. We were gods that night, or at least that's what the crowd made us feel like. But now, sitting under a silent sky, I realize how fragile divinity is. The higher people lift you, the easier it is for them to forget you bleed. My phone buzzed again. It was Taehyung. He sent a video of himself and Jimin laughing at some cooking disaster in the dorm kitchen. "We burned the rice again," his message said. "We miss you. Come home soon." For a second, I felt warmth spread through the cold air, because even when everything outside was chaos, those small reminders, the laughter, the teasing, the brotherhood kept me tethered to something pure. The next morning, I received an invitation from the label for an emergency press meeting. They wanted to control the narrative. Those words always sound like chains disguised as strategy. I told them I'd go, but only if I could speak freely. They hesitated. Freedom is unpredictable. Corporations hate that. Before the meeting, I called Namjoon. "Should I do this?" I asked. He paused for a long time. "Only if you're ready to tell the truth, not the version that's safe." I asked him what he meant. He said, "People forgive honesty faster than they forgive performance. Be human, not heroic." So I walked into that conference room, dozens of cameras, microphones, reporters waiting to dissect every breath. I sat down, no makeup, no stylist, just me. They asked everything. Was I hiding the relationship? Was BTS breaking up? Was the marriage a publicity stunt? Every question was sharp, rehearsed. But when I answered, I didn't rehearse. I said, "I'm still me. I still love music. I still love the fans. But I also love someone who isn't on stage. And that shouldn't be a crime." The room went silent. For the first time in weeks, silence didn't feel like an accusation. It felt like respect. Afterwards, I walked outside and found a small group of fans waiting. Some held signs that said, "We love you no matter what." Others just cried quietly. One young girl handed me a letter and said, "I used to think idols couldn't be human. Thank you for proving me wrong." I smiled and bowed. On the drive back, I thought about how strange this life is. You spend years trying to appear perfect, and the moment you show your imperfection, people finally see you. Maybe vulnerability is the only real stage left. That night, my fiance and I visited my parents again. My mom hugged her tightly and whispered, "Take care of him, but let him take care of you too." My father smiled and said, "Welcome to the family. Just don't let fame eat your peace." After dinner, my mom asked me to play something on the piano. I started with Euphoria. Halfway through, I stopped singing and just played. She closed her eyes. My fiance leaned on my shoulder, and I realized that peace isn't a place, it's a person. Or maybe it's a moment. Maybe it's this. Later, as I sat alone on the porch, the night felt like it was breathing with me. I thought about everything, the attack, the backlash, the noise, and suddenly I understood what Jin meant when he said peace moves slow. Because right then, peace wasn't an announcement. It was silence that didn't scare me anymore. When I returned to Seoul, the city looked the same, but I didn't. Something inside had shifted. I wasn't running from pain anymore. I was walking with it, like an old friend who finally stopped shouting and started whispering lessons. When I stepped back into the high building, the smell of the hallway hit me first, that familiar mix of coffee, floor polish, and faint studio dust. I'd walked this corridor 1,000 times, but that morning it felt like a mirror maze. Every reflection on the glass walls showed a different version of me. The rookie who used to run barefoot to practice, the exhausted performer holding back tears backstage, the man now walking in with the weight of an entire conversation about love and boundaries on his shoulders. The first person I saw was Hoseok. He was in the hallway dancing alone, hoodie halfway off, earphones dangling. When he noticed me, he didn't say a word. He just grinned and pulled me into a half hug that smelled like sweat and freedom. "You're here," he said simply. I nodded. "You kept the place alive while I was gone." He laughed. We just held the rhythm. You bring the heartbeat. Inside the studio, Taehyung was sprawled on the couch, humming something low and soulful. Jimin sat beside him, scrolling through his phone. The moment they saw me, the air shifted a mix of relief, curiosity, and something softer, forgiveness without words. So, the married man finally returns. Taehyung teased, his voice light but his eyes searching mine. Jimin threw a pillow at him. He's not married yet, idiot. Then he looked at me and said quietly, but he's braver than most who already are. Yoongi was behind the console, adjusting levels, pretending not to watch me too closely. Jin arrived a few minutes later with snacks, like it was any ordinary practice day. Namjoon came last, laptop under his arm, posture calm as always. When all 7 of us were in the same room again, time folded in on itself. For a heartbeat, it was 2013. Again, no scandals, no pressure, just 7 boys with a dream too big for their lungs. Namjoon broke the silence. Let's write. No meeting, no plan, no PR strategy. Just a sentence that felt like oxygen. Yoongi loaded a blank project file, the screen glowing like a new beginning. What are we writing about? Jin asked, mouth full of chips. Namjoon looked at me. About everything he just lived through. The room went quiet again, but this time it was creative, silence, the kind that hums with possibility. I hesitated. You sure? It might be too raw. Hoseok shook his head. Raw is real. Jimin added, real is what they need. So I started talking about the attack, the noise, the guilt, the peace I found on the beach, my parents' words, her quiet strength. Every detail became a lyric, every emotion a beat. Yoongi tapped his pen on the desk, building rhythm from my breathing. Taehyung hummed a melody that sounded like a wound healing. Jin added harmonies that felt like sunlight breaking through gray. We didn't title the song at first, it just existed, a heartbeat translated into sound. Namjoon eventually called it Permission to Be Human. We all laughed at how perfect it was. Recording, it was different from anything we'd done before. I wasn't trying to sound flawless, I was trying to sound honest. When my voice cracked on the chorus, Yoongi didn't cut it. Keep that take, he said. That's the truth in it. And for the first time, I didn't fight him. When we finished, we listened in silence. The speakers filled the room with something tender, defiant, alive. The lyrics weren't about fame or apology, they were about humanity, about love that refuses to hide, about peace that doesn't need to be perfect. As the last note faded, Jimin whispered, this feels like closure. I nodded. Or maybe a beginning. Later that night, we sat on the rooftop above the building, legs dangling over the city lights. It was cold, but no one cared. Namjoon passed around cans of beer, and we toasted to the kind of peace that can only exist between people who've walked through fire together. Yoongi said quietly, do you realize what we just did? We turned pain into permanence. Taehyung leaned back, looking at the sky. That's what art is when you bleed, but make it sound like music. I looked around at them, these brothers who'd seen me at my worst and still stayed. Jin with his steady humor, Hoseok with his light, Namjoon with his wisdom, Yoongi with his scars that spoke louder than words, Jimin with his empathy, Taehyung with his mystery, and me, the youngest, still learning how to be both man and myth without losing my soul. I told them, sometimes I think God gave me you guys so I wouldn't drown in my own reflection. Jimin smiled, eyes glistening. And maybe he gave you love now so you finally see yourself outside of the mirror. That sentence wrapped around me like warmth. Because maybe that's what all this chaos was preparing me for. To love without fear, to live without apology, to sing without perfection. When I got home, my fiancée was waiting on the balcony, city lights flickering behind her. How was it? She asked. It felt like healing, I said. She smiled. Then it was worth it. We stood there for a long time. No words, just wind. Somewhere below, I could faintly hear a group of fans singing one of our songs. Their voices were small but sincere, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel owned by that sound. I felt grateful for it, as if the universe was reminding me that connection can survive even after illusion dies. Before bed, I opened my journal again and wrote one line. If love makes you forget who you are, it's not love. But if it helps you remember, protect it. And I think that's what I'm doing now, remembering. Remembering why I started. Remembering that being loved isn't the same as being understood. Remembering that even if the world attacks, I can still choose grace. When the song finally dropped, I didn't watch the numbers. For the first time in my life, I didn't care about charts, awards, or first hour streams. I just wanted silence, the kind of silence that comes after you've said something true. But silence doesn't exist on the internet. By dawn, Permission to Be Human had already taken on a life of its own. People were dissecting the lyrics, posting translations, debating who the you in the chorus was. Some said it was written for the fan. Some said for her. Some said for myself. Maybe it was for all of them. I woke up to hundreds of messages from ARMY. Not the angry kind this time, but the trembling kind, long paragraphs from strangers who suddenly felt seen. One wrote, "I didn't know idols were allowed to sound tired. Thank you for making it okay to rest." Another said, "My parents never understood why I loved BTS until they heard this song. Now they do." I read them slowly, like prayers whispered in different languages. Each one softened something that the headlines had hardened. When I walked into the studio later that day, the others were already there. Hoseok was filming a dance for the bridge. Jimin was helping him polish it. Namjoon had a notebook full of phrases he wanted to expand into poems. Yoongi just sat in the corner with his headphones on, nodding, probably already thinking about a remix. Jin came in carrying food again. Taehyung strummed an acoustic version of the song, humming in falsetto. And me, I just stood there watching, realizing how rare it is to witness art heal its own creator. We recorded a live version that night. No lighting rig, no stage clothes, just 7 microphones in a circle. When my turn came, I looked at them and thought, this is what forgiveness sounds like. Every note we sang was a small surrender, not to the world, but to peace. And when we finished, there was no cheering, just that sacred quiet that only follows something real. The next morning, management called again, but this time the tone was different. The response is overwhelming, they said. People are saying the group feels more human than ever. I smiled faintly. Maybe that's the point. They asked if I wanted to do interviews. I said no. I didn't want to explain the song. I wanted people to feel it. Explanation kills mystery. So instead, we released a behind-the-scenes video, unfiltered clips of laughter, mistakes, forgotten lyrics. There's a moment where Taehyung trips over a cable, Jimin bursts out laughing, and I'm just sitting on the floor grinning like the kid I used to be. That 30-second clip did more than any press release ever could. Later, while scrolling through comments, I came across one that said, "I was one of the people who got angry when you announced your marriage. I'm sorry. I get it now. You're allowed to be happy." I didn't reply, but I stared at it for a long time. Not because I needed the apology, but because it reminded me that even the loudest hate can evolve if you give it space. Sometimes people just need time to outgrow their own fear. That evening, I visited my fiancée again. She had candles lit, dinner waiting, the radio quietly playing Permission to Be Human. It was strange hearing my own voice in the background of my own life. She laughed when I told her that. "It's weird," I said. "It's honest," she answered. "And honesty is rare. Don't lose it now that people are ready to listen." I told her about the fan who apologized. She smiled softly. "See? Love doesn't disappear when it's challenged. It just changes shape." Then she said something I'll never forget. "Maybe the world attacked you because they were scared of losing you. But the truth is, they never really had you. They just borrowed the light you gave." Her words sank deep because that's what it felt like giving light until you forget what warmth feels like on your own skin. And maybe this marriage, this moment, was my way of taking back a little of that warmth without dimming the world for anyone else. A few days later, we all met again at the Hybe Auditorium for a fan event. It wasn't a concert, just an intimate gathering. We wanted it small, real, unscripted. When I walked on stage, there was no roar this time, just a long wave of soft cheering and tears. Some held signs that said, "You taught us boundaries." Others said, "We grew up with you now, you can grow too." I couldn't hold it in. I cried not out of guilt or sadness, but gratitude. Jimin handed me a tissue mid-song, smiling like a proud brother. Namjoon spoke afterward. He said, "This song wasn't meant to defend anyone. It was meant to remind us that being human is the bravest thing we can do." The crowd fell silent. Even the cameras felt like they were listening instead of recording. After the event, as we stood backstage, Taehyung said quietly, "You turned an attack into a love story." Yoongi added, "No, he turned it into truth. That's rare." I laughed, still wiping tears. Maybe I just stopped hiding. And Hosea grinned. That's what the world was waiting for. When we left the building, the night air felt different, lighter, like the city had exhaled. For once, I wasn't afraid of being seen, because being seen didn't mean being owned anymore. I looked up at the Seoul skyline, glittering like it had forgiven me. Maybe it had, or maybe I had finally forgiven myself. 2 nights after the fan event, I couldn't sleep. I kept rereading the letters that had been left backstage, hundreds of them, bundled with ribbons, some in English, others in languages I couldn't read but could still feel. Each page carried a heartbeat. One said, "You gave me courage to say no to people who didn't respect me." Another, "I thought I loved you because you were perfect. Now I love you because you're not." And one, written in shaky handwriting, said simply, "Please be happy, even if we never meet." I don't know why, but that one undid me. Because for so long, I'd believed love needed proximity, that to be loved, I had to be everywhere, visible, performing. But here were thousands of people loving me from a distance, asking for nothing back. It made me realize family isn't just the people who see you every day. It's the people who let you be unseen and still stay. The next morning, I met Jimin at a small cafe near the river. We sat by the window, both wearing masks, hidden in plain sight. He ordered 2 Americanos and said, "You look lighter." I smiled. Maybe because I'm done running from the noise. He sipped his drink. "You know, when you told me about the attack, I was angry. Not at him, at the world, but then I realized people mirror what we teach them. If we never show boundaries, they'll never learn them." He leaned closer, voice soft. "Now they're learning. You did that." We watched the rain blur the city outside. "You think they'll ever see us as just people?" I asked. Jimin chuckled. "Maybe not. But they'll see us as people who feel, and that's enough," I thought. Later that day, my fiancé and I visited an orphanage that BTS had quietly supported for years. No press, no cameras, just us. The kids didn't care about fame, they cared about play. One boy tugged my sleeve and asked if I could teach him how to hold a microphone. Another girl climbed on my back, laughing, shouting, "Jungkook oppa, sing!" So I did. I sang softly. No auto-tune, no spotlight, just raw voice echoing through the small hall. Their clapping was offbeat, their voices cracked, but it was the most honest concert I'd had in years. Afterward, one of the older caretakers pulled me aside. "The children don't know who you are," she said, smiling, "and that's why they love you the right way." That sentence followed me home like a melody. Maybe that's what I've been craving all along, to be loved in the quiet, unbranded way children love the sound of a song before they know who sings it. A few evenings later, I met Jin and Yoongi for dinner. Jin was loud, as always, joking about wedding food. Yoongi listened more than he spoke. When Jin left for a phone call, Yoongi looked at me and said, "You know what changes a man more than success or pain? Responsibility." I asked, "You mean marriage?" He nodded. "And meaning. They're the same thing if you do them right." Then he added, The moment you realize your happiness doesn't steal anyone else's, that's when you're free. I went home that night thinking about that word free. Freedom had always sounded like stages, travel, money, applause. But now it sounded like silence shared with someone who doesn't need you to perform. Wedding preparations began quietly. No extravagant press releases, no brand sponsorships, just family and close friends. My mother insisted on cooking one traditional dish herself. My father rehearsed a short speech but kept forgetting the words. When I told the members, they teased me endlessly. Taehyung said he'd sing Sweet Night as the entrance song. José promised to choreograph something respectfully chaotic. Jimin swore he'd catch the bouquet. Namjoon offered to officiate jokingly, though we all knew he'd end up writing a poem instead. Their laughter filled our group chat for days. And for the first time since the announcement, I felt anticipation instead of anxiety. A week before the ceremony, I went live again. Not to talk, just to exist. I turned on the camera while sitting on the balcony, city lights flickering behind me. Hey everyone, I said softly. I just wanted to say thank you for staying. Comments flooded in instantly, heart emojis, crying faces, messages in every language imaginable. I didn't cry this time. I just smiled, breathing in the strange stillness that followed months of noise. Somewhere between all those scrolling hearts, I read one comment that said, "We're proud of you for being alive your way." I looked straight into the lens and whispered, "Me too." After ending the live, I sat there for a long time, thinking about the journey from that night, the shove, the bruise, the doubt to this quiet balcony, this peace. Pain hadn't disappeared, it had transformed. And so had I. The wedding was set in early spring. We chose a small place outside Seoul, a garden surrounded by cherry trees. No paparazzi, no red carpet, just vows, music, and faces that felt like home. The members arrived early, each carrying a story from the years we'd lived together. Jimin straightened my tie. "You ready?" I laughed nervously. "Ask me again in 10 minutes. I left. Hoseok filmed everything, promising not to leak it, which meant he absolutely would, but only after approval. Namjoon placed a hand on my shoulder before the ceremony and said, "Whatever happens next, remember, you didn't lose the world, you just gained another one." When the music started, my fiancée walked toward me, light catching on her dress like 1,000 quiet blessings. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The cameras, the fear, the headlines, the years of public ownership. It was just her and me and the echo of every song that ever taught me what love could be. I don't remember the vows perfectly. I remember her voice trembling on the words, "Thank you for choosing peace, even when it costs applause." I remember my hands shaking. I remember the wind, and somewhere in that blur, I heard faint laughter, Jimin's, maybe Taehyung's, and realized the brothers who had carried me through storms were now witnessing the calm. When it was over, we stood under the trees as petals fell like slow snow. My mom cried quietly. My dad clapped too long. Jin shouted, "Kiss already!" And everyone laughed. It didn't feel like the end of an era. It felt like a new chorus starting. That night, long after everyone left, I sat beside my wife under the same trees. The lanterns were still glowing. "Do you think they'll understand now?" I asked. She smiled. "Understanding isn't your job anymore, Jungkook. Living is." And for the first time in a very long time, I believed her. The morning after the wedding, I woke up before the Sunday. The house was silent except for the faint rustle of curtains and the soft breathing beside me. For a few seconds, I didn't move. I just listened. It was the first silence in years that didn't feel like punishment. It felt earned. When I finally got out of bed, the world outside the window was washed in pale gold. The garden looked different now, emptier without the guests, but fuller somehow, as if peace had finally taken physical form. Cherry petals were scattered across the grass like quiet applause. I made coffee and stood on the porch barefoot. Every inhale felt like forgiveness. Every exhale like release. I thought about everything that had led here, the confrontation, the bruise, the backlash, the countless nights wondering if I had broken something sacred between me and the people who made me who I am. But as the sun rose, I realized nothing sacred had been broken. It had only been redefined. My wife joined me a few minutes later, wrapped in a blanket. "You're awake early," she murmured. "I couldn't sleep," I said. "My mind's still catching up to peace." She smiled. "Then let it. Peace doesn't need to be chased. It needs to be welcomed." That line stayed with me. Maybe for most of my life, I'd been chasing peace like it was another achievement, something to win, something to prove. But peace, I was learning, doesn't reward effort. It rewards honesty. Later that day, I drove to the studio alone. It felt strange walking in as a husband. The walls looked the same, but the air felt lighter. Yoongi was already there, working quietly as always. He looked up and said, "Congratulations." "Thanks," I smiled. He studied me for a second. "You look different." "I feel different." He nodded. That's what happens when you stop apologizing for being human. He played me a track he'd been mixing, soft piano layered over faint strings. It sounded like dusk, like endings that weren't really endings. "You should write over this," he said. "Call it whatever you want." I listened to it on repeat. Each note felt like a reflection, gentle, certain, forgiving. I wrote the first line in my notebook. "I used to fear silence. Now it's the only song I need." By afternoon, Jimin dropped by with food. "You really can't rest even for one day after getting married?" he teased. I laughed. "Resting feels weird." He sat beside me and opened the food. "Then make work your rest. Just make sure it's yours this time." That night, the rest of the members came to visit. It wasn't planned. They just showed up like they always did, like gravity, pulling planets back into alignment. Jin carried gifts from his mother. Hoseok brought champagne. Namjoon had a notebook full of new lyric ideas. Taehyung came with his dog, who ran through the house like it owned the place. We ended up sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by snacks and laughter. For a while, nobody mentioned fame or the wedding or the past month. It was just us again, 7 voices overlapping, 7 lives that had shaped one another in ways too deep to name. At one point, Jin looked around and said, "Remember when we used to dream about being normal?" We all laughed. Hoseok replied, "I still dream about that sometimes." Namjoon leaned back against the wall. Maybe normal isn't the opposite of extraordinary. Maybe it's what keeps extraordinary from collapsing. That hit me. Because these ordinary nights, these small conversations were what I'd been missing while chasing perfection. The world had made us symbols, but brotherhood made us human. When everyone left, I walked them to the gate. Taehyung lingered behind. "You're happy," he said, more like a statement than a question. "I think I am." He nodded, then looked toward the night sky. "You know what happiness sounds like to me?" "What?" He smiled faintly. "It's the sound of someone not explaining themselves anymore." After he left, I stood there for a long time watching the lights fade into distance. Maybe happiness wasn't loud after all. Maybe it was quiet enough to hear your own breathing again. Over the next few days, I started journaling daily, not for lyrics, but for clarity. I wrote about guilt, freedom, love, anger, forgiveness. I wrote about the fan who pushed me and wondered if he'd ever understand that he'd become my greatest teacher. Not because of what he did, but because of what it forced me to confront the illusion that kindness means compliance. One entry read, "The hardest part of fame isn't being seen, it's being consumed. And the hardest part of love isn't giving, it's allowing yourself to receive without guilt." Every day I felt a little lighter. Every sunrise felt a little less like survival and more like existence. I began to visit my parents more often, call the members without reason, sit with my wife in silence. I realized I didn't need to be extraordinary anymore to feel worthy. One evening, while cleaning my phone gallery, I found an old video from 2016, a backstage clip of all of us joking around after a concert. In it, I was 19, sweaty, smiling, saying to the camera, "I'll work hard so Army can be proud of me." I watched that line again and whispered to the screen, "You did, kid. You can rest now." The next morning, we started planning a new BTS project. Nothing huge, just something we all felt called to do. Yoongi said, "Let's make it about rebirth." Namjoon added, "No personas, just people." Jin grinned. So basically BTS, unfiltered. We laughed, but the idea stuck. That's how the concept for our next mini-album began. 7 stories about learning to breathe again. Not for awards, not for numbers, but because music was still the language that saved us. As we worked, I kept thinking about something my wife had said the day before. Your songs don't belong to the world until you stop protecting them from judgment. Maybe peace wasn't isolation. Maybe peace was creation without fear. To be continued, Block 6. Part 2 will move deeper into the making of the new album, Jungkook's renewed relationship with ARMY, and how fame transforms when it's finally met with peace instead of guilt. Would you like me to continue Block 6, Part 2 now? The studio became our sanctuary again. No deadlines, no cameras, just ideas colliding in the air like sparks. Hoseok tapped out rhythms on the desk, Yoongi layered bass lines that sounded like distant thunder, and Namjoon paced the room muttering half-formed lyrics under his breath. Jimin recorded scratch vocals, his tone soft but full of ache. Jim brewed coffee for everyone. Taehyung sat in the corner sketching possible cover art on his tablet, and I watched all of it, feeling like I was witnessing resurrection. For years, we chased perfection, the flawless note, the clean choreography, the seamless performance. But now, perfection felt meaningless. We wanted something that breathed, something that reminded us that art wasn't supposed to be safe. One night, while we were mixing, Yoongi turned down the volume and said, "You know what's strange? The songs sound warmer now." Hoseok smiled. "Maybe because we stopped trying to hide the scars." Namjoon nodded. "Or maybe because the audience can finally see themselves in us again." That was it, our thesis, our quiet rebellion. We called the project Still Us. It wasn't about reinvention. It was about reclamation, taking back our humanity from the image the world had built around us.